and the proposal for PNR. There is also an interesting point to be outlined, and this is related to the startups and PMI, because all together we tried to get involved the PMI earlier into the process and prepared for the recent Horizon 2020 calls. And in aeronautics, a wide range of declaration of interest have been collected. More than 200 PMI in Italy was actively involved. This is an interesting point to be developed. I don't want to enter in detail, obviously, just showing the results of this declaration of interest with a lot of items, both here and in the following slide, that are the path of interest of PMI in Italy that can be shared with other partners in Europe. I just wanted to mention that beside Clean Sky activities, there are complementary research activities in Italy that came both from regions and from the ministry for a total amount of currently of around 50 million euro. I will dedicate the last 2 minutes to introduce the Italian cluster for aerospace technology. I am the chairman. He's just born in 2012 and has developed a strategic plan consistent with the EU and national aerospace program, in particular reference to Horizon 2020. And the two platforms, Acar Italia for aeronautics and Spinit for space, are the major contributors to the cluster. Lot of important shareholders, but here I want to outline that the most important shareholders are the regional districts, in particular the major five, Campania, Lazio, Lombardia, Piemonte, Puglia. And so it's very interesting, the scheme, because they represent the regional interest, but they wanted to be integrated at the national level in order to avoid overlap and to increase the synergies. What are the efforts at the present of the Italian aerospace cluster? We are looking to improve the national technological excellence, develop a full aerospace high-tech network, increase the competitiveness, and also the employment growth, but in particular build up strategic and long-term cooperation with the other international academies, industrial clusters, and networks. This is the main point of the CTNA. What about the funds? The aerospace cluster is not the unique one. There are 8 national clusters in different areas of technologies. The total funding is around a little bit more than 300 million euro. For aerospace cluster, there are 40 million euro funding for different projects that are seen as the starting point to further elaborate European collaboration with other partners. In particular, due to the focus of our conference, I want to outline one of the projects, greening the propulsion low-pressure turbine, that is driven by Aero, but is carried out with a network of university and PMI. In conclusion, there is a promising process of integration between the two main ministries involved, let me say the Ministry of Education, University and Research and the Ministry of Economical Development with region. So there is more integrated efforts today also taking into account the opportunities offered by the regional specialization strategy. So any overlap of financial effort at regional and national level must be avoided, and all kind of synergies must be pursued to build up credible Italian initiatives that attract other partners in Europe. This is very shortly the picture in Italy. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni, for sticking to time and for a very concise and yet a very complete description of the program. So next, Mr. Koenig, Friedrich Koenig, to tell us a little about the German national program.
So thanks, Frank, for the introduction. I come before you unarmed. I will not throw slides at you. I was asked to be brief and tell you something about LUFO, which some of you hopefully might not know already, and others of you might find some valuable information of things that have changed. My unit, the National Program Management Office for the Aeronautical Research, deals with administering and running the LUFO program. That's the National Research Program for Aeronautical Research. And as Rick has said, it has a rather long tradition in Germany. It was started back in the 90s of the last millennium. And funny enough, when it was started, that was seen as a very short, once in a time research program, which had to end by 2000. That's at least the way it was designed. Well, it's been around for 20 years, up and living, alive and kicking, as I would say. And I'll give you some developments that have occurred in the past 10 years. As Rick has pointed out, we're now with LUFO 5, the fifth period. And the third period, LUFO 3, which was around 2003 running to 2012, had a volume of 160 million euros in total. That amounted to about 20 to 30 million euros a year. And now, as Rick has said, we're up to 150 million euros funding per year, only for the LUFO program. And LUFO 4, which was the last program, with the last project still running and probably be ending by 2016, had a volume of, in total, 850 million euros. That's only funding. So we're talking roughly about 1.7 billion euros worth of aeronautical research work which has been done. So that's a significant amount of money. Especially for Germany, this is the only or the largest single sector research program we have. And it's even more astonishing if you take into account that the aeronautical industry, from an economics point of view, is not a very large sector within Germany. It's a rather small sector receiving a significant amount of state funding, which is complemented, and that's a peculiarity of Germany, by the Länder programs, which we also run. These programs, namely Bavaria, Hamburg, Brandenburg, and Lower Saxony, they complement the funds that are dedicated by the national government. And as Rick has pointed out, or I should say, unlike some of you might think, it's not our primary task to ensure that there is no complete duplication of money, because this is very unlikely. As has been said, 50% of the money comes from the industry, and they take, or usually take good care that this money is spent wisely and not wasted on the same issue twice. It's more the other way around. It's about complementarity. How can we make sure that, for the lack of information, some consortium in one Bundesland, for example Bayern, attempts to achieve the same thing which has been done elsewhere already, or where some work is under the way that leads into the same direction. So we're trying to place the money in a way that all relevant topics are covered, and not a lot of money, not by bad planning, just for lack of information, is placed on the same topic. And the worst thing that could happen is that you have some, 3 or 4 mediocre solutions for one problem, but the rest of other very important problems uncovered. And in the end, you were left with a large or lack of knowledge that should have been provided through the research arena. So these national programs on regional level, they're not quite as old as a LUFO program, the oldest one being the one of Bavaria that started also in the 90s of the last century. But these other programs came into being now just about 2000 and latest 2008. And it's our task to make sure that the money is spent wisely. Now, complementing this, the European Commission 8 years ago or 9 years ago wisely forced us into forming what's called the AirNet. I shouldn't have said forced. They persuaded us to team up with our sister organizations in Europe, and now saying, now this was a really great task by the Commission because it would not have been done otherwise, where we work together and team up with our sister organizations all through Europe in the AirNet network, in the air transport network. And the idea is to fill the gap between European level that run on the European program in the Horizon 2020 or formerly FP7 and also on Clean Skies. Then you have the programs on the national level, which encompass only companies, of course, from one country. And then every now and then there's a need for an intermediate layer. And this intermediate layer can easily be accomplished if two national programs join up and team up. And for 8 years we've been running this project in its two phases as a coordinator. Now the Italian colleagues are taking over for the third phase. And a very active interchange of information and transnational cooperation has come out of this. For Germany, very important, the cooperation with the Austrian takeoff program, but also with our British colleagues, not so much on an institutional base, more on a company base. And just lately, there were larger calls underway with more than 5 different countries teaming up, pooling money, trying to tackle specific topics that have been left out of the European funding because there was simply not enough funding available for them. So that's something that's very important. That's nicely complementing the work that we're doing on a regional, on a national, and a European level. So the gap in between has been filled. Of course, this instrument could be used better in the future, but the good news is that all these organizations know each other well. We know our funding processes rather well, so there's the possibility to actually start transnational projects without an overly amount of extra administrative burden, as been pointed out by Rick. A program should be as simple as necessary. Not simpler, but as simple as necessary. And it should not be, how should I say, the inventiveness is not within the program and the mechanism. It's within the ideas that run within the program. Our program really provides a space. It's a life support system for ideas, for your ideas, which you need to follow through. And we try to keep the changes between the LUFO calls as small as possible, knowing that our system is far from being perfect, but at least it's stable. And once you get used to the system and to the administrative processes and you feel well acquainted with them, it's easy to apply again. And that's something else I want to point out. LUFO is organized through calls, very much the same way the Commission does it. And the changes between the calls are relatively small. Now, as for LUFO 5, as far as I can say, so far the budget is not fixed yet. It's in a preliminary early stage. But if things go the way they are planned and the level stays equal, then within 7 years we will have an amount of well over €1 billion euros dedicated to LUFO 5, which is a very significant amount of money, 150 million euros per year. And of course, today we do not know how long LUFO 5 will last, but it's leveling at a rather high level of support, of national support, which is complemented by the region. So I invite you to make use of this, and I invite you, if you're not placed in Germany, you have no significant footprint there, to go back to your country and ask if bilateral agreements or trilateral agreements are possible. It's less complicated than it would seem, but of course the initiative has to come from you. It's an interest-driven instrument and not so much mechanism-centered. Now it's living from your ideas. If you have an idea which you think we need a partner from a different country, then it's up to us to find the funding for you or to organize something that will make the project live. Not so much invent a mechanism for inventing a mechanism for the sake of having something new, which is complicated and you do not know exactly how to use. So we're trying to keep the changes as small as possible and invite you to make use of the money that's out there. This all, as been said by the Italian colleague, is sitting on top of a very, very large transversal program, which is probably 1 or 2 orders of magnitude bigger than the LUFO. But the LUFO is designed, and the money is reserved for technologies which nobody else will develop for us as an industry, as a community. And of course we draw information and we draw knowledge and technologies from other sectors, but this is where the specificities of our very strange industry pulls together, and we're trying to find solutions for that. So thank you very much for your attention, and hoping to see some questions for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Friedrich, and I think you've introduced yet another dimension to this discussion about not national or European, but bilateral programs as well. So another interesting topic. So great pleasure, as I said earlier, to welcome Sylvain Sivolvenkovsky from Canada, and tell us how things work in Canada, please.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you, first of all, to the organizer for having invited me today. I'm so proud to be here with you. I realize that I have probably too many slides to show you. I only have 7 minutes, but I will try to be as brief as possible. My intent was to give you an overview of the aerospace industry in Canada. I will not go through all those numbers, those figures, but I will summarize it by saying that this is an important industry for us. The last year was a very important year in Canada in terms of aerospace research. We had many major investments made by the government. We had the refinancing of a major strategic aerospace and defense initiative of $1 billion. It's a refundable support to the companies for a research project. We had the creation of an aerospace technology demonstration program called the Tech Demo program, with a budget of $110 million of public funding for the next 5 years. We also have the creation of a National Aerospace Research and Technology Network. I will talk about it a little bit later. We will officially launch the network in April of this year. And we will launch as well a coordinated call. In fact, we hope to launch a coordinated calls with the Europeans. We do have a specific budget for that. And the refinancing of Garden. So we're happy to tell you that we will receive $10 additional million for the next 5 years. Just to give you an idea of all the structures that exist in Canada, sorry about that. That exist in Canada. There is many different initiatives, such as the CREAC, which is a well-known program based in Quebec. And CREAC is expanding itself to become the National Aerospace R&D Network. And this network will include a coordinated call with the European partners. Garden is not so far from the National Aerospace Network. We're working right now to evaluate the links between all those research networks. Garden can become one of the green aviation program of that network. And we have several other programs. Just a quick slides to invite you to participate in the first National Network Forum that will occur in April 16 and 17 in Montreal with 1,000 people. And we will discuss their ideas of project. And I'm inviting you to go on the website and to see all the details about this important event in Montreal. Going back to Garden, so Garden means Green Aviation Research and Development Network. And the objective is still the same since the beginning, is really to increase the competitiveness of this industry through the support of environmental projects. We have a 2-pillar strategy. We bring financial support to projects. We're on the TRL scale of 3 to 7. It's a non-refundable support for companies, as well for universities and research centers. And we are the focal point for reflection and discussion on environmental aviation in Canada. Garden is part of a federal program called the Business-Led Network of Centers of Excellence. It was created in 2009. The initial budget was $42 million. $13 million was coming from the government, and the rest was coming from the industry. So as I said, Garden2 was announced earlier in 2014 with $12 million of additional funding. We already have supported or selected 9 projects for the Garden2 program, and we will select additional projects further on the road. The positioning of Garden in terms of when compared to the other program, we think that Garden fits well between the more fundamental research programs such as CREAC and the national network, and the more tech demos program, more close to commercialization on the TRL level. This is our membership. Our members, you will recognize some logos, Bombardier, obviously, the big players in Canada, Pratt & Whitney, Bell Helicopter, Estoline, CMC Electronics, and the others. We do have something like 12 universities involved in our network, and we're working as well with the National Research Center, the NRC, and the CREAC managed the network. Just to give you an overview of a typical Garden project, this one is a project called Airframe Noise Reduction, led by Bombardier. So you can see that on this project, different partners are involved. 3 SMEs, 1 intermediate players, 1 OEM, several universities. In terms of results, from the 17 projects that we have, we brought support for a value of $38 million, we can say that we have supported 35 plus technologies, and 10 out of those 35 technologies are really close to commercializations, and some of them are already used on existing platforms or newer aircrafts. We have 30-something members, 270 researchers, mostly from industry, but as well from academia. We're working on the international scene, especially with our Chinese colleague. We should be able to launch a project with COMAC probably next April. So the Garden2 program has been refocused around 3 major research thrusts. The first one is the clean air transportation system, the second one is the quiet one, and the third one is the sustainable air transportation system. The selection criteria to be eligible from the Garden funding is the industry has to bring 50% of the total cost of the project, and we need at least 2 collaborators involved in the project. And in terms of relevance, the impact on the Canadian aerospace sector obviously is an important one. The environmental theme covered by the proposal, the TRL progression, and the feasibility and the technical merit is important. Rounds of funding, we already had the first round of funding for the Garden2 program. And how we do it, we organized regional workshops across Canada. We did it in Winnipeg, Toronto, and Montreal. It's a big country. We have to be everywhere in this country. Last week we were in Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto, and Montreal. So to discuss ideas of project. And from those ideas of project, we received 22 letters of intent for a project value of $40 million. And we invited 12 applicants to submit a detailed form, and we have selected 9 final applicants for the funding. Just to give you a very quick overview of the projects, I will not go into the details. In terms of round of funding, we will have a next round of funding before the end of this year. Once again, we will organize workshops. I would be happy to discuss the international collaboration with my European colleagues. And so we want your ideas of project. I will stay there. I'm not sure if I fit my 7 minutes. I try to do my best.
You have a little credit in the bank, but thank you for keeping the time. So, Sylvain, quite a rich landscape in Canada, and also I've always admired the fact that you have schemes not just at national level, but at the state level, and even 1 or 2 of the big cities have their own schemes running. So it's a great place, and I say I've been involved in some of them, particularly the CREAC scheme, which I think is very imaginative, and the way it brings the universities in. So our next speaker is Professor Sergei Chernyshev. He's the executive director at SAGI, and he's going to tell us a little about how things work in Russia.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you all, organizing committee, first program committee, for inviting for this very important, interesting event, Clean Sky Conference. Michelle, to you personally, you gave a first call a few months ago. For us, it's a good opportunity to share with you what we are doing on our national level. Of course, it's a big country where kind of transformation so far, last 20 years. So transition is our normal, permanent condition today. So we have a few programs that which are funding our efforts in civil aviation. I will talk about the biggest one, that's called the Russian Federation Program for Aviation Industry Development. Started from 2013 through 2025, so covers more than 10 years even. The total budget is about 20, exactly, I mean, for today's rate of exchange. It's in rubles, but here it's in dollars, $27 billion, including 20 billion as a public funding. And the overall mission, understandable, just to bring up our capabilities in order to be competitive and be a normal partner for many other companies internally and externally, internationally. We have just recently developed, and the government actually approved the so-called National National Strategic Plan for Aeronautics Research and Technology Development. Again, covers about 15 years of time. And this is a research and technology development plan. The total budget for 10 years through 2025, and the beginning is for this program particularly is from 2016 is $6 billion, including special line of funding, special item called international cooperation. So about 200 million, roughly 20 million per year, specifically for international efforts, meaning that with those money we can come here and use it for Horizon 2020 projects to work together, or Clean Sky. In this case, we don't request any European money. We just come with our own money and just coordinate research efforts. The central part of this national plan is aviation science and technology foresight until 2030. It's kind of like a combination of Vision 220, Flight Path 250, and strategic research agenda. So it has some peculiarities and some details. So talking about market and civil aviation development, of course, taking into account some peculiarities of the Russian own market. It has been developed by Russian leading research entities like TSAGI, CIAM, VIAM, Gaznias, and some others. It's structured like similar as a SRA, areas of technology, new configurations, engines, materials and structures, systems, and there must be the fifth item called enabling technologies. So various tools, software, design tools. Typical project is lasting 2 or 3 years, and a typical size is between 3 million and the maximum, I would say, about 200 million. So this one of the biggest project. We call it Aircraft 2020. This matrix again introduces something similar to Clean Sky 1 maybe. So you see various integrated technology demonstrators. In our case, it's a long-range wide-body aircraft. Again, technology demonstrator, middle, short-range, narrow body, green regional aircraft, low-boom supersonic business jet, and short takeoff and landing transport aircraft. And vertically, we have various different technology areas, like new generation aerodynamics and high lift systems, engine integration and engines itself, advanced materials and structures, avionics and systems. And important, of course, we're working together in this project with the United Aircraft Company, is market research, so to find proper niches for our own capabilities. Of course, mainly focused on Russian national market. Go back. It looks quite similar what you actually know from Clean Sky and previous frame programs, but though we have some peculiarities. I'll just tell you that here even talking about, let's say, regional aircraft, having in mind our sizes, the country size, regional means distance no less than 1,500 kilometers. And low temperatures, high temperatures, so we have a broader ratio of working temperatures from minus 60 up to plus 50. So it provides extra tough say requirements for various systems of aircraft, future aircraft. Landing gear, of course, very important because hundreds of Russian airports, runways, they're not so well developed, and it's again we apply tougher requirements for the landing gear for future aircraft. One of the tools to better coordinate our research efforts in Russia and manage actually national strategic research plan. I mentioned before, government decided to set up kind of new big holding entity. It's not holding company because it's all research entities, but it's kind of government-owned national research center that's called Zhukovsky Institute that will combine 5 leading, again, government-owned research entities, TSAGI, CIAM, TSAGI is major airframe and integration, CIAM propulsion, Gaznias avionics, some military applications, Sibnia, kind of Siberian branch of TSAGI, used to be a branch of TSAGI, but now it's separate independent institute, so some wind tunnels, some strength and structure capabilities. And the 5th one is testing center, testing facility in close vicinity of in Moscow region. So the total amount of employee of this new alliance will be roughly close to 10,000 people. Location from Moscow through Siberia. And we hope that it will work to better coordinate our projects. So I hope that we can actually bring our capabilities, not only capabilities, but some funding for international work. And we hope that we can work together to develop new aircraft like this or similar in near future and build a better future together. Thank you so much.
should never interrupt a good guitar riff. That's my motto. So, thank you, Sergey, for the talk and for an insight into an amazing program. Very large program, very comprehensive, touching all the bases, and particularly pleased to see there is money in there for international collaboration. As you're aware, Europe also is putting aside money for collaboration with Russia, so hopefully those two will come together and, as I said earlier, allow us to drive aerospace in particular forward in that work. So thank you for that. So next, my friend and colleague Bruno Stuffley. He thought he wasn't on, but he is. And Bruno is going to tell us about the French CORAC program and how they're organized. So Bruno.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to everybody. So I have no movies, no music, and no slides, and so I hope it will be okay. Anyhow, considering the French research program in France, we have been benefiting from support for research from French Civil Aviation Agency, what we call DGAC, 4 years. I don't know exactly when it started because I've always known this program, and I think it started before I was at business. At this time, this program was set up in a bilateral mode, meaning DGAC, which is each industry, national in each French industry, and without any kind of cooperation or small cooperation. This program was set up with a different research program of each industry. In 2007-2008, in the wake of what we call Grenelle de l'environnement, I don't know how to translate Grenelle in English, but that means it's a big gathering of politicians, industry, stakeholders, and kind to set up a new dynamic in France. Aviation stakeholders were invited to step up their actions regarding environment, and so the CORAC, which means Council for Orientation of Civil Aviation Research, has been created in 2008, and so now it has 6 years, if I'm right, and CORAC can be considered now as a pot where we build and exchange technological roadmaps in order to set up research projects. And the idea is to understand the relevance of having cooperation between the different stakeholders. So in CORAC, you find the aircraft manufacturers, Airbus Helicopters, Dassault Aviation, the system providers, Safran, Thales, Zodiac, the representative of the supply chain, representative of SMEs, representative of airlines, Air France, airports, and ONERA, and some other representatives. So you have really an enlargement of the representation of not only industry, but all the stakeholders. A little bit like ACARE, of course. So the main objective is to share and build these technological roadmaps that we share, and also to promote projects. We address in CORAC 3 main types of projects. The first one are what we call targeted technological projects, and they are related to emergent technologies, and most of them are initiatives coming from SMEs or research labs, and they are catalyzed by pôle de compétitivité, competitiveness clusters that you know in France are also stakeholders of research. And we have in France 3 clusters related to aeronautics, Aerospace Valley in Toulouse, Aztec in the Parisian area, and Pégase in the southeast of France. So targeted technological projects on one hand. The second type of projects are what we call transverse projects, and their main focus is to foster modelization capacities, understanding of physics, and in order to improve our model of physics. For example, we have started projects on protection against ice, lightning, fire. And the main objective is to improve our modelization capacities. So that's the second type. The third types are devoted to demonstration platforms, so integrated projects aiming at validating architectures. On this third type of projects, of course, we have a certain adherence with Clean Sky, and we have to take care about the complementarity of what we do in CORAC with Clean Sky on this third type of project. And the main objective we have with this demonstration platform, which are taken at the national level, is to foster the domains where the French industry is considered or supposed to be excellent. And it's why we have as main topics in this demonstration platform. On one hand, composite for large components. It's not a topic completely addressed in Clean Sky. Avionics and cockpits, which is domain of excellence in France. And for propulsion, the preparation of the next generation of LIPX family and the preparation of a new hybrid turbine. So we are taking care about the complementarity, and the objective is really to foster the domain of excellence of the French industry. Another issue which is also important and which is shared with Clean Sky is the level of involvement of SMEs in these projects. And we have been very successful to identify and embark a large number of SMEs which were not known at first by industry. And they are selected through open calls, so they are really open to promote their own technologies and own development in these platforms. So I gave you a description of what we promote in this CORAC program. I would not be complete if I would not mention that we also promote, on the other hand, advanced research project aiming at understanding the fundamental mechanisms of impact on environment of aviation operation. And we started some projects with research labs, of course, which are the most stakeholders of this activity, by a focus on contrails formation and induced cirrus. That give you some ideas about the projects which are undertaken in this type of advanced research. Okay, so.
Bruno, thank you. Again, as you said, a very long-running program in France and a lot of support from successive governments for aerospace research. So thank you very much. Next, final one of the national programs before I turn the floor to the Commission, then Gareth Williams from Airbus is going to tell us a little bit about the new Aerospace Technology Institute in the UK.
Thank you very much, Rick. So I should say, perhaps at the outset, I am from Airbus. As Rick mentioned earlier, I'm located in Toulouse. So I'm familiar with the CORAC program that's just been mentioned. And I am also on the ACARE Steering and Integration Board, and therefore familiar with some of the drivers which have stimulated the definition of these national programs. I'm here today in my capacity as a member of the Aerospace Technology Institute Working Group. So that's a collaboration between industry and government agencies to actually kick-start this Aerospace Technology Institute, which I'll talk to you a little bit now. Perhaps to start with the characteristics of the aerospace industry in the UK. It may seem somewhat strange that there was neither a national aerospace policy nor any technology strategy or national plan of any sort in a country where an industry provides 5.7 billion of gross value add, employs 100,000 people, and has a strong position internationally in terms of aerospace, being number 2 after the USA. So rather strange that in fact there was no industry policy and there was no National Aerospace Institute of any sort. It's R&D intensive as an economy, 1.4 billion spent in 2011, and we know the typical status of technology life cycles and product life cycles, so I won't repeat it. A key part, though, that is recognised and helped to gain political support for the Aerospace Technology Institute was the fact that there is a lot of spillover from aerospace research and development into other industry sectors. So it's a very good catalyst for technological development in the industry as a whole, and therefore it's an attractive option for governments to invest in. I mentioned the political angle, perhaps to provide some context for the Aerospace Technology Institute. It does not sit as an isolated entity. It is part of a structure which includes an aerospace business leaders group, senior figures from the sector, who join with the Secretary of State for Business Innovation and Skills on a frequent basis throughout the year to discuss topics relevant to the industry. Then at more of a working level, there is a Minister for Business and Enterprise. It's interesting, perhaps, it's not a Minister for Technology, it's a Minister for Business and Enterprise who leads what's called the Aerospace Growth Partnership, where the intent is to grow this industry sector within the UK. There is then a steering group and a number of different working groups, each of which pursue their own part of the total agenda, only one part of which is technology. So the ATI has a context where it fits into that technology box. So the government in the UK announced last year a substantial investment in technology, and it was very unusual, very well received by the industry simply because it was dedicated to aerospace. 2 billion in total, importantly committed over 7 years. This is from a background where there would be annual calls for projects with a total value of about 5 million per year and the total duration of each project of about 2 years. So a dramatic shift, a real sea change in the considerations of the UK government, and very welcomed by industry as a consequence. It was to create or safeguard jobs. The national political imperative was clearly there. But importantly, and I think we've heard this theme on several occasions now, it was to support businesses of all sizes. There may be some, such as my own Airbus, which is a very large presence in the UK, but the whole programme is there specifically to support the range of businesses, and indeed a proportion of that total 2 billion of activity is specifically dedicated to open calls, which are specifically to encourage small to medium enterprises to participate. And in fact, the first of those, with 25 million of funding available over 2 years, was announced late last year. So what is the Aerospace Technology Institute? I'm afraid it suffers from the typical misuse of the English language by the English population. When you see the word institute, you may think of a physical entity, a building with lots of people and lots of laboratories performing work. In fact, this is not the case, and at the point of launching, at the point of announcing this programme of work, there was no physical institute, there were no members, there was no management structure, and in fact, there was an intent for industry and government agencies to work together to make the necessary structure work. So this ATI is to provide leadership for aerospace technology at a national level. It's to direct funds for aerospace research. It doesn't issue the money. There are existing government agencies to do that, but it sets the strategy and gives the direction on which that money is distributed. And then importantly, and perhaps I haven't heard this commented on before in the other presentations, is to provide an economic evaluation and an impact study back to the government on the result of that aerospace research. So if the government is providing $2 billion of investment, they want to know what they're getting for their money at the end of it. So part of the ATI's role is to establish the economic impact of this investment. And then I would say more typically it's to ensure dissemination, represent the UK in international forums, and develop connections with other programs. I think those are typical themes that we've heard in a number of the presentations. But what's the scope? What's the level of ambition of the ATI? Well, it's kept to 4 fairly simple pillars: aerodynamics, structures, propulsion, and advanced systems technologies. So there's been a bit of introspection, and you won't see on there whole aircraft as an example, because there is a recognition of where the UK economy fits into the total aerospace supply chain. The purpose or the role of the ATI is then to shape and direct how this 300 million per year co-investment is deployed, to establish linkages and ensure efficiencies between universities and the respective government agencies that either fund or support those universities, and essentially become the place to go if you have a question to ask about aerospace research and technology in the UK. In terms of progress, I would say from a standing start, literally a press announcement by a government minister, now invent the institute, gather the people, find the money, make the projects, go. From a standing start, an aerodynamics centre has been established in April 2012 with secondees to initiate that process. 17 projects have been launched, total investment of about 57 million from government and 48 million from industry. And then there is a leveraging effect where there's an additional investment of 11 million has been established to create a national wind tunnel capability. Why is that necessary? It's a good example of an efficient use of resources. There are more than 70 wind tunnels available at universities around the UK. 15 of those are research active. How many of those are industry relevant? There is some sorting, sifting and filtering of that information to help the government understand where they should put their investment for future wind tunnels. Do we need an 85th wind tunnel, an 86th wind tunnel, or are we better developing the capability of an individual one? And then the technology programme with which industry is principally involved, covering the period 2013 to 2014, because helpfully the UK financial year runs from April to March, unlike the German one, which I think runs from October to September, or the European Commission one running January to December. That programme has a portfolio of 40 projects, a total value of about 400 million, and there are 12 lead partners. I would remind this is from a standing start less than a year ago. So probably the key point, the key message to make is that the ATI, whilst it is making progress, is still in itself a work in progress. And I'm sure you'll hear more of it in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gareth. Only a Welshman living in France could criticise the English for their use of the language, so thank you. Finally, in this session, Manuela Suarez from the Commission is going to try and draw some of this together and show the interconnectivity of both the Commission's programmes and what you've been hearing from the individual nations. Manuela.
Yes, so thank you. Thank you for inviting me to to participate in this very interesting panel. As requested by the chairman, I'm going to be brief because I'm the last one, and I think that everybody would like to go to the cocktail and have time for some questions. So I'm just going to give you very briefly some elements, some general lines of the European Union new Horizon 2020 framework program, especially because we have some guests from outside Europe. And more specifically, some considerations about the smart, green, and integrated transport challenge. So as probably almost of you know, the Horizon 2020 was launched last December for 7 years. I would just start by saying that is really very different from the previous framework programs. It has what we call a strong societal challenge focus. It brings research and innovation under one program, and believe me, it brings lots of simplification and change in terms of program implementation. So the challenge, the smart, green, and integrated challenge transport is one of its important pillars, with a share of around 8% of the overall budget of the 80 billions of Horizon 2020, which means that we are going to have more than 6 billion allocated for the 7 years for the transport in general. So for aviation, it will be a large share of this 6.3 billion. Horizon 2020 is also more cross-cutting, where different parts are going to work together. For example, in addition to the transport challenge, we can find, for instance, aviation, biofuels, tackled in the other part with the energy challenge, high-performance computing in the ICT part, materials and manufacturing in the enabling technologies, and much more. And of course, one big part is of Horizon 2020 is devoted to basic research with no topics where some elements will be related, of course, to transport too. So as this is cross-cutting, in the Commission we have established internally specific groups to ensure the coherence and the synergies between the different areas, and will continue to do so even more in the next future. Some words about the current work program for 2014 and 15. We have biannual work programs and annual calls. On this 2014 and 15, we have around 100 million for aviation. And it's true that this has a very different setup from the past. There are less topics and less prescriptive topics. So more freedom is left to the proposers to bring forward new ideas, how to address the challenges. And I know that especially in the transport area, this constitutes quite a different approach from the past, when the technology topics were often very detailed and very predefined. So this approach still exists in Horizon 2020, but now it's in the public-private partnerships like Clean Sky 2 and CESAR for the traffic management. There the calls can be more descriptive, can be even launched more often. So the applied research following the industrial technology roadmaps is best suited for implementation in these public-private partnerships and not so much as these very broadly defined work program topics anymore. So just some words on these public-private partnerships, which are now an important component of Horizon 2020. So last July, the Commission adopted what they call the Innovation Investment Package, bringing forward 10 proposals for public-private partnerships, but also for public-public partnerships, where altogether 8 billion of EU funding is combined with national funding and with private investment to reach a total budget of around 22 billion. Part of this package is, as we all know, the proposal for Clean Sky 2. And this will also be somewhat different from the Clean Sky 1. There are several administrative and governance changes to adapt the implementing structure of the joint undertaking to the new Horizon 2020 principles in terms of openness, in terms of transparency, in terms of enhanced advisory role of member states, and also lighter financial regulation, the voting rights of the Commission. But I insist a little on this, some new principles which the legislator, the Parliament, and the Council were very keen on putting in the proposal. But more important, Clean Sky 2 will have a higher budget. The decision is not final, but we know that it will be almost final, so just 5% of reduction of the initial proposal. And it will then constitute the main EU investment in aeronautics industrial research. So it will not be anymore, as it was in the past, one investment among others, but will be by far the biggest investment from the EU budget in aeronautics. So this means that the private partners share the responsibility with us and with the joint undertaking in establishing an ambitious technical program which brings all relevant stakeholders in Europe together around a common program. And taking into account the whole European landscape in Clean Sky 2, this is a challenging task, but it's a clear necessity. As I have said, there will not be any more comparable budget for aeronautics research outside the Clean Sky 2. So, be them the leaders, the core partners, or the smaller partners, they all have an important role to play to make Clean Sky 2 a successful program. It will also have the Clean Sky a state representative group. And here are the links with the national programs. This state representatives group will have to ensure the synergies with the national programs and also with regional investments done via the structural funds. So, in fact, this group is an advisory capacity, but it has an obligation to provide information on the relevant national programs. And so, via this group, we hope that the clear synergies will be established. So, I just would like to finish saying that this cross-cutting nature of Horizon 2020 and this interlinked governance, because let's be honest, so more or less half of the budget is in private partnerships, a private-public partnership. So we hope that this provided a good basis to ensure that the different public programs are well coordinated in the different member states and with Clean Sky, and give, in this way, the best value for money in a time of restricted availability of public funds. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Manuela. So, a fascinating discourse covering several countries in Europe and also our close neighbors in Russia and also our good friends across the sea in Canada. Manuela spoke about the program we're about to embark on in Clean Sky 2. You're here to celebrate the results of Clean Sky 1. It's important to remember Clean Sky 1 is still has nearly 3 more years to run of programs, so plenty more good stuff to come from Clean Sky 1. As many people in the room will know, in putting together the proposal for Clean Sky 2 and justifying it, the industry members were asked to identify additional complementary activities that would further increase the total value. And we were able to identify 600 million euros of activity, much of it in national programs, some of it in companies' own programs, that was directly aligned already with the Clean Sky objectives. So I think it shows already there's synergy there, there's the ability to bring these things together. No individual nation's program is ever going to be big enough to let that country be a major player in civil aerospace on its own. We've all seen that, and Gareth stressed that in the structure of the UK program. We know we're not going to make a whole aircraft in the UK, at least not a big one. And I think we know that Europe has to act as a whole through these research programs to deliver the technology we need. So I hope you've enjoyed the session. I'm afraid due to a late start and my appalling chairmanship, there is no time for questions, but you know who the speakers are. Once they have a drink, they will be much more fulsome in their ability to explain to you their programs. So I suggest we break for a cocktail and you ask each of the speakers. But can I just ask you to thank with me Giovanni, Frederick, Sylvain, Sergey, Bruno, Gareth, and Manuela. Thank you very much indeed.